Welcome to the Tobacco Online Policy Seminar, TOPS. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Parisa Mogadam, a PhD student in health economics at The Ohio State University. TOPS is organized by Mike Pesco at University of Missouri, C. Shang at The Ohio State University, Michael Darden at Johns Hopkins University, Jamie Hartman-Boyce at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, and Justin White at Boston University. The seminar will be 1 hour with questions from the moderator and discussant. The audience may pose questions and comments in the Q&A panel, and the moderator will draw from these questions and comments in conversation with the presenter. Please review the guidelines on tobaccopolicy.org for acceptable questions. Please keep the questions professional and related to the research being discussed. Questions that meet the seminar series guidelines will be shared with the presenter afterwards, even if they are not read aloud. Your questions are very much appreciated. This presentation is being video recorded and will be made available along with the presentation slides on the TOPS website, tobaccopolicy.org. I will turn the presentation over to today's moderator, Jamie Hartman-Boyce from the University of Massachusetts Amherst, to introduce our speaker.
Hello, everyone. Today, we continue our summer 2026 season with a single paper presentation by Julia He entitled Standardizing Excise Taxes and Estimating Tax Pass-Through Rate for Oral Nicotine Pouches in the U.S. Market. This presentation was selected via a competitive review process by submission through the TOPS website. Dr. He is a health economist and senior research scientist at the Center for Tobacco Research in the Ohio State University Comprehensive Cancer Center. Her research uses economic analysis and policy evaluation to examine tobacco use in the U.S. and internationally, generating evidence to inform tobacco regulation. Her recent work focuses on oral nicotine pouches, an emerging class of nicotine products. Dr. C. Shang, an associate professor at The Ohio State University, is a co-author of the study and will answer select questions in the Q&A. Dr. He, thank you so much for presenting for us today.
Hi, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here today. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for joining my presentation today. Today, let me share my screen first. Today I will be presenting my study titled Standardizing Excise Taxes and Estimating the Tax Pass-Through Rates for Oral Nicotine Pouches in the U.S. market. So oral nicotine pouches are becoming increasingly popular product in the U.S. in recent years. However, states use various methods to tax these products, making it difficult to compare tax levels across states. In this study, I will introduce a method to standardize ONP excise taxes so that all taxes can be compared at this across states. Okay, so this is my funding statement. This study was supported by the OSU T-Course project. I was also supported by the OSU T-Course pilot project. I declare that I have never received funding from tobacco, vaping, and pharmaceutical industries. This study uses the Nielsen IQ retail scanner data. As always, the conclusions drawn from the data are those of the authors and do not represent the views of the Nielsen IQ, and I have no other conflict of interest to declare. So what are oral nicotine pouches, or ONPs? ONPs are small pouches that contain nicotine but do not contain tobacco leaf. They are placed between the gum and upper lip, allowing nicotine to be absorbed through oral mucosa. Some of the ONPs contain tobacco-derived nicotines, whereas others contain non-tobacco nicotine, also called synthetic nicotine. Some of the well-known brands include Zyn, On, Rogue, and Velo. ONPs are available in a range of nicotine concentration, ranging from 1.5 milligram to 8 milligram per pouch. Some of the ONPs contain up to nearly 50 milligram nicotine per pouch. ONPs are also available in a wide variety of flavors. You can name it, many flavors, and such as mint, menthol, wintergreen, spearmint, fruit, tobacco, coffee, etc. So usually, generally speaking, ONPs are considered lower risk nicotine products. However, they still contain nicotine, and they have the potential to lead to nicotine addiction. So why is it important to study ONPs? The primary reason is that the ONP market has grown rapidly in recent years. Since early sales data show that the ONP sales increased from just 163,000 units in 2016 to 46 million units in 2020. Our more recent work found that the ONP sales has continued to accelerate since 2021, with monthly ONP sales rising from 327 million units in July 2021 to over 1 billion units by May 2024. And a similar trend has also been observed globally. At the same time, the awareness and ONP use prevalence has also increased. National survey data show that 3% of US adults reported ever use of ONPs in 2021, and nearly 30% of adults who smoked had ever seen or heard of ONPs, and 5.6% had ever tried ONPs, and nearly 17% reported interest in using ONPs in the next 6 months. Use has also increased. The past 30-day use among high school students increased from 1.1% in 2021 all the way to 2.4% in 2024. These trends highlight the growing public health importance of ONPs. So one of the key questions surrounding ONPs is whether they contribute to harm reduction. This discussion is similar to the debate around e-cigarettes. So the overall public health impact depends on who uses them and how they are used. On one hand, harm may reduce if adults use ONPs to quit smoking, or if individuals who would otherwise initiate cigarette smoking use ONPs instead. However, on the other hand, harm may increase if smokers dual use cigarettes and ONPs rather than quit smoking altogether. In addition, if people who never used nicotine, especially adolescents, begin using ONPs and become addicted, the net public health impact could be negative. These competing possibilities highlight the importance for the how evidence-based policies such as taxations can maximize the potential benefits of ONPs while minimizing the unintended consequences. So this figure illustrates the ONP tax landscape in the United States. As of December 2025, no federal tax has been imposed on ONPs. Taxation was determined at the state level. Among 50 states and Washington, D.C., 29 states and D.C. do not impose any taxes on ONPs. Among the 21 states that have ONP taxes, 3 applied weight-based specific taxes measured at dollar per ounce, and 4 applied unit-based specific taxes measured at dollar per can, and 11 applied ad valorem taxes based on wholesale prices. 3 applied ad valorem taxes based on manufacturer prices. Regarding the product type, 15 states tax ONPs containing both TDN and NTN, and whereas 5 states tax only ONPs with TDN. Nevada is the only state that tax only ONPs with NTN. The number of states that imposed excess taxes on ONPs increased from 12 in 2017 to 21 in 2025. So regarding the tax pass-through rates, previous literature found that cigarette taxes were fully passed or overshifted to prices, with higher tax pass-through rates observed for higher-priced cigarettes. Research on moist snuff shows similar pattern. My previous study found that moist snuff taxes were fully passed through to prices at the 25th and 50th percentiles and overshifted at the 75th percentile. However, to date, no evidence exists on ONP on the tax pass-through rates for ONPs. So based on these research gaps, this study has two main objectives. First, we sought to develop a method to standardize ONP excess taxes. Second, we will use the standardized tax measure to assess the tax pass-through rates for ONPs. Then I will move to the first objective, standardizing ONP excess taxes. So the key idea is to select a single tax base as a common anchor and convert all other tax bases into this shared metric so that all taxes can be compared. So we developed two standardized tax measures. First, we convert ad valorem taxes and unit-based specific taxes to weight-based taxes. We construct both time-invariant and time-varying measures. Time-invariant measures involve using a fixed benchmark price, whereas time-varying measures involve using varying prices. And then the second, we convert all the specific taxes to ad valorem taxes. So these standardized tax measures will support future studies by enabling robust statistical analysis and comparisons of ONP tax levels across states. So the ONP tax data was collected through direct communication with each state's tax agencies. For those states that did not respond to our email inquiries, we submit a FOIA request. And then we also use the Nielsen IQ retail scanner data to extract ONP prices and sales. The CPI data was used to calculate the inflation-adjusted ONP prices. So first, I will discuss the method for converting all other tax bases to weight-based taxes. Since the can weight vary across brands, for example, a thin can weighs 0.21 ounces. However, the on can weighs 0.19 ounces. So we first calculate the market share weighted average can weight. We call the standard can weight. Based on our previous research, the four brands, Thin, On, Rock, and Velo, accounted for 99% of market share. So we use these four brands and each market share, and then calculate the standard can weight, which is 0.23. Then we use this standard can weight to convert the unit-based taxes to weight-based taxes. For example, Texas imposed $1.46 taxes per can, which translates to the weight-based taxes is $6.26 per ounce. When we convert ad valorem taxes to weight-based taxes, for the time invariant measure, we use the following formula. So the benchmark price, how we determine the benchmark price. Since 2017 is the first year that the ONP sales data, sales record is available in the NRSD. Only 3 non-tax states have sales record, and 3 of them had fewer than 3 months sales record. So we consider that it's not representative of the national data, national price. Therefore, we extend the year to 2018. So we use the average sales weighted retail prices from 2017 to 2018 across 11 non-tax states. Then we calculate the benchmark price. Then we use 2 assumptions for the markup rate. One is 35 markup rate, and the other one is 20% markup rate. Then I will give you 2 examples. The first example, Minnesota imposes taxes at the 95% of wholesale prices. So first, we calculate the fixed benchmark price. According to our data, the benchmark price is $4.39 per can. Then we translate this price into weight-based. So that corresponds to $18.83 per ounce. Then we calculate the benchmark wholesale price according to the markup rate, 35 markup rate. That is $13.95 per ounce. Then we use the formula. We divide this benchmark wholesale price by 1 plus tax rate, and then multiply by tax rate. That is $6.79 per ounce. And then the second example is Colorado. Colorado imposed a tax at a 56% of the manufacturer list price. The only difference is when we need to calculate the benchmark manufacturer price. So we divide the benchmark retail price by 1.35 square. So that's the only difference. And then we use the same formula to calculate the standardized weight-based taxes. That is $3.71. So the methods to convert to weight-based taxes using time varying measures. So the time invariant measure captures only policy-driven changes. However, it doesn't reflect the actual levels of ad valorem taxes. So we calculate the time varying weight-based taxes. So we replace the nominator, the benchmark price, with the varying price levels. So that the prevailing prices. So it's worth noting that in case this measure, if the price data is missing for a given state month combination, the corresponding standardized specific tax values will be missing. And then the next we will introduce how we convert to ad valorem taxes. So there are 2 types of specific taxes. One is weight-based taxes, and the other one is unit-based taxes. So in this case, we first convert the weight-based taxes into unit-based taxes using the standard can weight. And then we convert the unit-based taxes to ad valorem taxes at the wholesale level using this formula. Basically, the nominator is the unit-based specific taxes, and then the denominator is the benchmark prices exclusive of specific taxes. And then for states that impose ad valorem taxes at the manufacturer level, we just divide this tax rate by 1 plus markup rate. So I will pause here and then see if discussant has any questions, and also the audience if has any questions.
Thank you so much. So yes, audience, please do submit questions through the Q&A. But first, I'm very happy to introduce today's today's discussant, sorry. Our discussant is Dr. Lauren Saplicki, an associate scientist from Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. Lauren studies the content and influence of tobacco marketing, particularly nicotine pouch marketing in the US. Over to you, Lauren, for any initial thoughts or questions.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Julia, for the amazing introduction to this topic and setting the stage for how important understanding this is. And I think at this point, I just wanted to take a little bit of a bigger picture lens and try to understand when thinking about tax policy, if you could talk a little bit about how tax policy in the US works or other international contexts, if that seems relevant. So are there any federally mandated taxes on tobacco products currently? I know you said that there's no federal excise tax on OMPs, but anything that's relevant for us to know about how other tobacco products are taxed and also how states or other localities might have authority to have their own measures and whether any of that might be preempted by federal law. So just kind of a broader overview of how taxes as a policy mechanism works.
Okay, good. That's a great question. So tobacco taxes actually are very different. For combustible cigarettes, in the US, we use a unified tax measure. All taxes are levied on one package of 20 cigarettes, right? That's a unified taxes. We don't need to standardize. Yeah. But for other tobacco and nicotine product, tax are becoming excess taxes are becoming complicated. For example, e-cigarettes, because there are many types of e-cigarettes, including open cigarettes and a closed system, open system cigarettes and closed system cigarettes. And then some states tax, on the as we can see for the OMPs, some states, they just use various methods to tax e-cigarettes. And for smokeless tobacco, it's similar to OMPs because as I conducted, the email inquiries directly to the, each state's tax agencies. And many states told me that, in their states, OMPs are taxed at the, similarly to moist snuff. So, for moist snuff, because for smokeless tobacco, there are several types of smokeless tobacco. For example, they include moist snuff, dry snuff, snus, right? And what's the other one? Snus and also sorry, yeah, there's four types. Yeah, four. I did a paper on this one. So so the excess taxes on smokeless tobacco need also to be standardized in order, they can be used to examine, okay, what is the tax effects on use behaviors, right, on sales. So without these unified measures, we cannot do the statistical analysis. And for OMPs, it is very similar, to smokeless tobacco. So in the beginning, many states they tax OMPs just like moist snuff. But for other states, they adopt ad valorem taxes, which is the percent of the prices. They can use the manufacturer price as the base price or the wholesale price as the base price. So yeah, so this variety, they create such a heterogeneity in the tax methods. So which, makes it very difficult to compare tax levels across states. So that provides the motivation for this present study.
Yeah, that's so helpful to kind of have that broader picture of how this all works, especially as we're thinking about price as a policy lever, wanting to have a price that's accessible to adults who might want to use this product, if they already are using tobacco, might want to use this product to help quit, versus, maybe making it cost enough to deter young people who have less, money to spend on these products. So really interested to dig into your results and see what you have to say. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, good. I will go ahead to present the results. Okay, let me share my screen first. Okay, good. I will sorry. I will proceed to the results. So this figure shows the descriptive results from our standardized weight-based taxes. So the first two bars presents the average tax rate for using the time invariant price, which is the benchmark price, and the last two bars presents the results, the average tax using the variant price. And then we can see that the time invariant average weight-based tax is $4.2 per ounce, ranging from $4.2 per ounce to $4.6 per ounce, depending on different markup rate assumption. And then the average when we use the variant price level, the average weight-based tax range from 4.7 ounces to 5.1 ounces, $1 per ounce. And then this figure shows the corresponding standardized unit-based taxes. So roughly speaking, so the time invariant average standardized taxes is about $1 per can, for standard can. And then the right figure shows the standardized OMT taxes from 2017 to 2025. So in nominal terms, we can see that the OMT taxes exhibit an upward trend. However, in real terms, OMT taxes remain relatively stable. Figure on the left shows the figure on the right shows the national average time invariant specific taxes. Figure on the left shows the average time invariant standardized specific taxes, which we restrict sample to only states that have OMP taxes. And then figure on the left shows that the average when we restrict sample to those states that have OMP taxes, the average standardized OMP taxes exhibit a downward trend. And then these figures shows the standardized ad valorem taxes. So right figure shows the national average ad valorem taxes. So assuming a 35% markup rate, the average ad valorem taxes range from 45% in 2017 to 53% in 2025. However, when we restrict sample to those states that have OMP taxes, the average ad valorem taxes exhibit a downward trend, declining from 194% in 2017 to 135% in 2025, assuming a 35% markup rate. And then this table illustrates the comparison of tax levels between different products. The estimates in the middle three columns are sourced from Curtis paper, and then the estimates for the moist snuff is sourced from my previous paper published in 2024. So in this paper, assuming a 35% markup rate, the standardized OMP taxes is about 92 cents per can in the fourth quarter of 2023. That corresponds to a $3.95 per ounce. When expressed as a percentage of cigarette tax rates based on ounces, OMPs are taxed at 86% of cigarette taxes. That is substantially higher than e-cigarettes and moist snuff. When expressed as a percentage of cigarette tax rates based on equivalent units, OMPs are taxed at a nearly 29% of cigarette tax rates, which is also substantially higher than e-cigarettes and moist snuff. Then I will proceed to talk about the OMP tax pass-through rates to prices. The method that I use is I conducted 3 separate OIS models. The outcome variables are OMP prices at the 25th, 50th, and 75th percentiles. And then that enables me to examine how the tax rates will vary across products with different price levels. And then the independent variable is the standardized OMP tax measures. In the primary analysis, I employed a two-way fixed effects and to test the robustness of my findings. And we conducted 2 sensitivity analyses. First, we restrict sample to those states with specific taxes. Second, we conducted a DCDH event study with continuous treatment. And then this table shows the estimates from the primary analysis. So one can see that for OMPs priced at the 25th percentile, the taxes were undershifted to prices. However, for OMPs priced at 50th percentile and 75th percentile, taxes are overshifted to prices. This table shows the results from the restricted sample analysis. We can see a similar pattern to the primary analysis. So for lower priced OMPs, taxes are undershifted. For higher priced OMPs, taxes are overshifted or exactly shifted. Even though these estimates are not statistically significant, these results should be viewed with caution because the small number of observations. And then next, I will show the results from the DCDH approach. So this graph shows we did not observe any significant tax pass-through to prices, tax effects, for OMPs priced at the 25th percentile. And then next one, for OMPs priced at the 50th percentile, we observed that the significant tax effects starting with the second post treatment period, and the average cumulative treatment effect is 0.8. That indicates that the tax effects are significant, and then the taxes can significantly increase OMP prices. We also observed that the placebo tests show no significant pre-treatment effect that provides the assurance that the assurance for the parallel trends assumption, and that also strengthens the validity of our causal estimates. And then the next one shows the results for ONPs priced at 75th percentile, and similar to the last figure, taxes were exactly shifted to retail prices at the 75th percentile level. And then the cumulative effect is 0.95. And then to conclude, this I would highlight the two main findings. First, our standardized tax measure show that ONPs are priced at $4.30 per ounce, or about $1 per standard can. This place ONPs, the tax levels of ONPs comparable to cigarettes and substantially higher than e-cigarettes and smokeless tobacco. We also observed that the tax pass-through rates for ONPs, for lower priced ONPs, taxes are either not or undershifted to prices, depending on the modeling choices. For for the medium, the ONPs at the medium level or 75th percentile prices, taxes may be under exactly or overshifted to prices. And these findings are consistent with existing literature. We observed in cigarettes and smokeless tobacco, which, like generally find that cigarettes are fully or overshifted to prices, and higher tax pass-through rates are observed for higher priced tobacco products. And then I would also, discuss the potential, the explanations of the tax pass-through rate that we observed in this study. ONP market is highly concentrated, as ONPs are dominated by several large tobacco companies. In such market, companies may use a similar strategy in their response to cigarette taxes by overshifting taxes to prices for profit. However, ONPs represents a relatively new and rapidly growing market. Companies may also have the incentive to undershift taxes so that they can maintain pricing competitiveness, and then to encourage people to use ONPs. And then this study also highlight the need for future research. In future research, we can examine how the ONP taxes can influence prices, how ONP taxes can influence consumer responses, can influence the use behaviors or product switching behaviors. Okay, that's pretty much all that I have. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So I would like to again turn over to our discussant, and for people listening, please do put chat questions in the Q&A.
Great. So thank you so much again, Julia, for preparing such an engaging kind of conversation and talk on this topic. And I think that what you're saying about the tax rates being similar to cigarettes is very interesting, both in kind of the standardized level and in what maybe we're seeing with overshifting or undershifting costs to consumers. And I was wondering if you could, I take the point that ONPs are trying to break through in the marketplace, and so maybe that's why there's some undershifting. But could you say a little bit more about maybe the brands that we're seeing in the 25th percentile? Are they like sort of the market leaders? Or are they more the brands that maybe have less of a market growth? Like kind of if you're able to parse through like why that undershifting might be happening in terms of trying to in terms of the brand kind of composition, if that's available in the data that you looked at, as well as kind of what that might be saying about potentially like how these products could reach youth or other consumers, with kind of undershifting the costs.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, actually, in the because we extract the ONP prices from the Nielsen retail scanner data, and then when we look at the detailed, the each sales record, when we actually, we aggregate the NRSD, the sales data to state and month level. So, but before the aggregation, I look at some, sales record, especially for those, like uh the price, for each those sales record that, you can see the price are extremely low. Some of the sales records, they even indicates like less than $1. So that may indicate, in some period, some retailers may have like price promotion. So
Okay.
some promotions were going on, so that, greatly decreased the price of ONPs.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was another question that I had, was sort of how does the discounting and the promotions get accounted for
Hmm.
in the standardization process? So you can see it in the data, but so how, like, could you maybe walk us through how those maybe seasonal ticks like are accounted for in the process that you use to standardize the tax rate?
Um, when I standardized ONP taxes, actually I use the for the time invariant measure, I I construct a benchmark price, which is a fixed price level. So that benchmark price apply to all states, all time periods.
Okay.
Yeah, so that will give us a tax measure that is free of market change, free of tax pass-through change, that only reflect the change in tax rates. So that, that will not, so the product promotion will not affect the benchmark price.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, but for the time varying measures, the price levels, because we use the varying price, right? The prevailing price for each state, each
Mhm.
month. Yeah. And then that, if there is a product promotion going on, that will greatly affect the time varying measures of ONPs taxes.
It's a complex marketplace.
Yes,
So yeah.
that's why we observe a greater, variation in the time varying measures. Yeah.
Do you, so with Nielsen data, could you talk a little bit about maybe there are a lot of strengths to it, but maybe some of the limitations, and to the best of my understanding, online sales aren't always accounted for. So do you have any thoughts on how online sales might be the same or different than what we're seeing in the brick and mortar retail environment? And any thoughts on how you might want to go about understanding that in your own like future research as well?
Okay, good question. Yeah, so we use the Nielsen IQ retail scanner data. That's a brick and mortar data, right? Because but according to a previous literature, I think a Lieber published a paper, talking about the how representativeness of the NRSD data. So actually, according to what they found, ONP, so the NRSD represents, 80. I think it's 84% of total tobacco sales in
Mm.
the United States, based on the because OMPs are dominated by large tobacco companies. So we expect that the OMPs have a similar, retail channel than, traditional cigarettes. So that's why we expect, the OMP sales is well represented in this data set. However, online sales, besides the brick and mortar sales, online sales, we know there are a great portion of OMPs, occurred, online, but we do not have the data for online sales. Well, for online sales, so we are unable to expect to estimate how large is the online sales.
Okay. Yeah. And any thoughts or any resources you can share on like how we might even go about understanding the online sales environment? Like it, yeah, I guess everything is proprietary, I suppose, in terms of that data getting shared, but it seems like such a gap in kind of our understanding. And so yeah, I don't know if there's any conversations in your field about like how to better characterize the online sales market.
Um, Actually, I'm sorry that I do not have estimates, because the online sales data is not available. So we do not have estimates of, how much is the how large is the online sales, but we do have the, the Nielsen retails, the
Is the
Nielsen
gold
sales
standard.
data. Yes.
Yeah.
Using this data, we can analyze, how OMP sales has increased and how this market, we can analyze how many brands in this data and how are the sales volume of each brand and how this, this market evolves. That's what we can do. But for online sales, it's just, the inability of the data, Yeah.
Yeah. I think like those, I can pause here if there are any Q&A questions, I think, Jamie, if you wanted to share. I know maybe some of them have been answered, but we can also have an online discussion.
Sure, that sounds great. Thank you both so much for the really interesting discussion. It's such a complex and highly highly complex market. So
Yeah.
C has answered a lot of these questions, but I do have a new one that's just come in from Erica Manser, who's asked, did your data set reveal whether states with more comprehensive nicotine regulation beyond taxation experience different pricing or sales trends than states relying primarily on excise taxes? And as new nicotine analogs and products enter the market, do you believe existing tax structures are flexible enough to capture those products, or will legislatures need to revisit their tax statutes?
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, it's a long
it's a
question.
lot. I can break it
It's a
down for
lot.
you.
Yeah. 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 Can you break it down in the
Yeah,
first one?
absolutely. So the first part of that question is
Yeah.
whether your data set reveals if states with more comprehensive nicotine regulations, so not just taxes, but whatever other regulations might be in place, experience different pricing or sales trends than states that relied primarily on excise taxes as a way to regulate these products.
Okay. Yeah. So, good question. So, about the regulation, as far as I know, some states, for example, California, and for some, localities, they impose the flavor restrictions, and that flavor restrictions also includes OMPs. Well, some states they do have flavor restrictions on other tobacco products. However, that flavor restrictions do not apply to OMPs. So that's a big heterogeneity in how those flavor restrictions are applied, what products are, do they apply to. So that's, yeah, I think that's, and also, in recent years, more researchers, they also bring up a question on the pack size, how
Mm.
the pack size will influence the ONP sales. Um, so so as far as I know, um, I I do not know whether FDA has ever, like issued regulation on pack size. That's I actually I don't know. I don't know. So yeah, so and then for the comprehensiveness of the other other regulations, that's yeah. So for yeah, flavor restrictions is a big one. So
Mhm.
yeah, and several states has already have that regulations. Yeah, and
And is that something that that you have or theoretically could look at in your data set, right? Whether that comprehensive nicotine regulation, as opposed to relying primarily on taxes, is impacting pricing or sales of pouches?
um, taxes do have an effect on the
Yeah.
pricing of ONPs. That's
Yeah.
what I did in these present studies, and
Yeah.
we observed significant tax effects, right?
Yeah.
And from the event study. But if other factors also influence the pricing of ONPs. I did another study, which I presented in the Tobacco Regulatory Science meeting yesterday.
Mm.
Yes, that one, I found that the ONPs are, the ONP sales are higher for those flavored products. So
Okay.
yeah, and also, ONP sales are higher, ONP sales per capita are higher in rural areas than in urban areas. But, and also, I found that ONPs are priced lower in rural areas than in urban
Mm.
areas. So but why did tobacco industry price ONP differently in urban and rural areas? That is a question that we need to examine, right? That's a question. Yeah.
Yeah. Really
Yes.
interesting. You've
Yeah,
had a busy
that's
couple of
a
days presenting today and
yeah.
There's another question within this question. So,
Mhm,
as new nicotine analogs or new other variations on products, new products
mhm,
enter the market, do you
mhm.
think that existing tax structures are flexible enough to capture those products, right? To, for example, apply to nicotine analogs, or do you think legislatures might need to revisit their tax statutes?
Um, you know, as it's unlike cannabis, some of the states tax cannabis based on their potency level. However, ONPs are not taxed based on the nicotine concentration, right? So um that's something, state legislators may consider,
Mm.
in the future, whether tobacco products, especially like e-cigarettes, these e-cigarettes also vary by nicotine concentration, right? By
Yeah.
nicotine strengths. So yeah, and also we need science from biostatistics and from randomized control trials, whether, how those nicotine strengths will influence health outcomes. So we also need data from that part. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you get nicotine analogs, which might be an even uh, different but related part of that picture,
hmm Yeah.
particularly when thinking about nicotine strengths. All right.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much. I don't think we have any other questions open in the Q&A. Lauren, was there
hmm
anything else you wanted to add before we close out?
I did on the point of standardization. I do think it's interesting to look at other countries. So
hmm
recently, Bangladesh actually passed a law to standardize the size and the shape of their smokeless tobacco products.
hmm
They had a
Oh.
wide variety. I think with these nicotine pouches, at least, we're seeing kind of a standard shape and
hmm
quantity. But
hmm
other things like gums and lozenges,
hmm
those are, come in variable sizes. And so I think this
hmm
is a case where looking to like what other countries are doing and
hmm
complementary policies is
hmm
really really interesting because I can only imagine that standardizing a shape and size of something would harmonize some of the tax structure around how things are implemented and make it a lot easier, at least, to administer a tax-related system. So that's just a little bit of context from an international perspective as well. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Well, I think that closes us out then. Thank you all so much. Thank you for the wonderful presentation and wonderful discussion and great questions. And I will hand over to our MC.
We are out of time. Thank you to our presenter, moderator, and discussant. Finally, thank you to the audience of nearly 110 people for your participation. Have a top-notch weekend.